In the final seconds of the 2009 film The Blind Side, Leanne Touhy, played by Sandra Bullock, reflects on the murder of a 21-year-old black athlete in a local housing project. The young man had dropped out of school, fallen in with the wrong crowd, and had died in a gang-related shooting. That could have been my son, Michael, Leanne says right before the credits roll. I suppose I have God to thank for that. A decade later, it's hard to imagine a film from a major studio ending that way. The film began with Leanne Touhy seeing a homeless teenager named Michael Orr walking down the street in the cold. She and her husband, Sean, decided to take care of the kid. And finally, after years of sacrifice, Orr goes to college and eventually goes on to become a successful NFL player. In 2009, when audiences weren't lobotomized by procedurally generated Marvel slop, that plotline resonated. And The Blind Side made over $300 million on a relatively small budget. Sandra Bullock won an Oscar, although she herself admitted during filming that her acting wasn't even that good. Leanne Touhy used the film's success to help children find foster homes on social media. And outside of a few whiny articles on NPR or the Daily Beast, people basically loved the movie. The media loved the movie for the most part. In the years that followed the film's release, though, the tone changed. As Barack Obama set race relations in this country backwards by 50 years, academics, who are the source of most bad ideas and cynicism in the world, for some reason began obsessing over The Blind Side. They kept writing about it years after everyone else had moved on. In 2015, for example, a Clemson professor wrote this article in the journal Studies in Popular Culture. Here's the title: Racial Discourse in The Blind Side, the Economics and Ideology Behind the White Savior Format. That same year, a University of New Mexico professor authored a piece entitled The White Cinematic Lens, Decoding the Racial Messages in The Blind Side. As the years progressed, so did the left's obsession with The Blind Side. Their fixation continued after the Obama years. In 2019, a professor at Texas State University somehow attempted to connect Donald Trump with The Blind Side with a piece entitled Colorblind Racism, the Trump Effect, and the Blind Side. And if you want to lose 50 IQ points, you can read the abstract online, but I'm not going to bother reading it to you. That same year, in 2019, the popular YouTube channel Be Kind Rewind released this video explaining that the movie has a white savior problem. Watch.
This movie could have included the black families that united to support Michael before he lived with the Touhys full time. It could have been about organizing pickup football games as a kid with his friends, fostering a love of the game that he honed in high school. But John Lee Hancock chose not to do that. Instead, he canonizes a singular white family and deplatforms the supportive black community that Orr did have. That decision empowered Sandra Bullock with ample opportunities to demonstrate wit, vulnerability, self-confidence, and kindness in the process, to be the Spitfire the critics noticed. In other words, it gave her an Oscar bait role. That's what white savior films do. They shift focus and blame. They implicitly tell audiences that white stories are more interesting or worthy of your time than the stories of people of color.
So you got it. The film should have been about all the people who didn't house or educate or care for Michael Orr. It should have been about the kids who played basketball with him. I mean, why? Like, what kind of movie would that even be? What's the story there? Well, just because they're black and the family that took care of Michael Orr is white. That's the level of analysis. All of these articles and videos, and plenty more examples I could have used, demonstrate that The Blind Side triggered a deep underlying pathology that tortures the supposedly intellectual left. They simply can't tolerate the film's message. To this day, they just can't get over it. And they definitely can't allow any other major studio to make a film like it. I mean, that's never going to happen. In the past few days, predictably, this effort has entered a new, somehow even more demented and tragic stage. Michael Orr filed a legal complaint against the Touhys, as we talked about a few days ago. The media is promoting it relentlessly. They could not be more thrilled by this development. Watch.
We all remember the 2009 Sandra Bullock movie, The Blind Side, the true story of NFL star Michael Orr, who was adopted out of poverty by a wealthy family. But new court docs filed by Orr paint a far different picture.
I was just enthralled by her. I didn't think I could play her, but it was just such a beautiful story.
Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for portraying Michael Orr's adoptive mother, Leanne Touhy. The Southern mother of two took in the 6'4", then homeless and traumatized teenager when no one else would. Michael was portrayed by Quentin Aaron.
Do you want to stay here, Michael?
I don't want to go anyplace else.
But now the former NFL star alleges Leanne and her husband Sean never officially adopted him, but instead allegedly deceived him into making them his conservators just after his 18th birthday. In a legal petition filed today in Tennessee, Michael claims the Touhys used the conservatorship to make themselves and their birth children millions of dollars in royalties from The Blind Side. The Touhys haven't responded to our request for comment. Back when the movie came out, Leanne told us Michael was proud of the film.
I sent him a letter yesterday I'd gotten from someone in Atlanta, and I forwarded it to him, and I got back the sweetest text, and he said, I'm really proud this is making a difference. And so he knows it is.
Well, I'm glad we're past that. I'm glad we found a way to take this heartwarming tale and it turned it into a problem. It's thank God. But you certainly can't have a story like that. You can't have a story, especially of one race of people helping another race of people. We can't have that. We can't allow it. Well, it's clear that the left is giving up their morals and any common sense. There's no better time than to build a daily habit of prayer and meditation. Building a habit of prayer can help you cultivate an attitude of gratitude. Focusing on what you're thankful for can increase positive emotions and improve overall well-being. Hallow is the #1 Christian prayer app in the U.S. It's helped me maintain a daily prayer routine. It can help you do the same. Download the app for free at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. You can set prayer reminders, track your progress along the way. Not sure where to start? Well, check out Father Mike Schmitz's Bible in a Year podcast, available on the Hallow app. And you can also pray alongside Mark Wahlberg, Jim Caviezel, even some world-class athletes. With Hallow, you can customize a personal prayer plan that works for you. Listen wherever you are with downloadable offline sessions. Using Hallow to connect with others who share your beliefs and values can provide a sense of belonging, support, and foster a sense of community. Ultimately, we'll learn how we can become better individuals in spite of today's broken world as we strive to become more like Christ in our daily lives through prayer, fasting, and giving. Download Hallow at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. You get exclusive 3 months free. That's 3 months absolutely free at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. Now, the crux of the legal complaint is that the Touhys tricked Michael Oher into thinking that he was adopted when, in fact, the Touhys simply had a conservatorship over him, allowing them to take most of his money. So they're not good-hearted white people helping out a black kid. They are evil white supremacist thieves. That's the idea. But before we get into the actual complaint, there's a couple of points. First of all, that report you just saw implies that the Touhys defrauded Oher because they wanted money. And what they don't mention is that the Touhys are extraordinarily wealthy, independently wealthy. In fact, they're far wealthier than Oher has ever been, even after his NFL career. But we're expected to believe that this family, which is worth well over $200 million, schemed to rip off Michael Oher. Is that plausible? I mean, right away, it doesn't pass the smell test, as I said a few days ago. It sounds a lot like a washed-up athlete who burned through the cash he made in the league, and now he's looking for a payday and some relevance. And indeed, Oher's claim is especially suspicious since, according to the Touhys, Oher has been shaking them down for $15 million for a long time now. Allegedly, he filed this lawsuit only after trying to get the quick cash from a family he knows is rich and which still loves him. But there are more problems with this complaint beyond the ones that I just mentioned. For this accusation to make sense, for one thing, the Touhys would have had to see this homeless teenager walking on the side of the road and say to themselves, this kid's going to make us rich. His grades are terrible. No college program is interested in him. His father abandoned him. His mother's a drug addict. But he's going to make us a lot of money someday. And then there's going to be a movie about him, and we'll get royalties from that. And then through all this, as they raised him and sent him to college, Oher would be blissfully unaware of this dastardly scheme for more than a decade. And then it hits him somehow. Quoting from Oher's legal complaint, quote, "The lie of Michael's adoption is one upon which co-conservators Leanne Touhy and Sean Touhy have enriched themselves at the expense of their ward, the undersigned Michael Oher. Michael Oher discovered this lie to his chagrin and embarrassment in February of 2023 when he learned that the conservatorship to which he consented on the basis that doing so would make him a member of the Touhy family, in fact, provided him with no familiar relations with the Touhys." So the claim is that Michael Oher realized only in February of 2023 that he hadn't been legally adopted. It took him until this year to figure that out. Is that possible? Well, corporate media is certainly buying it, with no skepticism whatsoever. NBC wrote up the allegations without applying any form of scrutiny at all. MSNBC wants you to know that this is all your fault, actually. Quote, "Oher's lawsuit is an indictment of movie audiences that over and over again lap up stories about white people saving some downtrodden black person." Now, you might listen to that quote from the MSNBC article and wonder what universe MSNBC is living in. In fact, if you read any MSNBC article, you're going to wonder that, but especially this, because In this universe, movies about white people saving black people are extremely rare. And at this point, basically non-existent. I mean, can you name the last one besides The Blind Side? Go ahead. What's the last major Hollywood film where the good guy, the protagonist, is a white person who is helping out a black person? That's really none come immediately to mind. Now, for its part, the Guardian brought out the big guns. They report that, quote, The Blind Side's white savior tale was always built on shaky ground. According to the piece, quote, the movie version of The Blind Side has come to represent a low point for the white savior trope, the unlikely story of the rich white lady who turns a downtrodden black teen Hulk into an improbable Sunday pro. Jeffrey Montes de Oca, the founding director of the Center for Critical Study of Sport at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, took aim at the film's framing of adoption as a signifying act of whiteness that obscures the social relations of domination that not only make charity possible, but also create an urban underclass in need of charity. In her seminal tome, White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo excoriates the film as fundamentally and insidiously anti-black. What all these stories have in common, though, is that they don't interrogate the claims in Orr's lawsuit at all. They don't spend any time looking at it. The media is so giddy that The Blind Side is under attack that they don't care to actually do any journalism. They just trot out the usual fake experts to call it racist, as they've been doing for a decade now. Inside Edition even got in touch with the actor who portrays Michael Oher in the film to ask him whether Sandra Bullock should surrender her Oscar, which is a question so stupid that the actor should respond by just laughing hysterically at it. But that's not exactly what happens. Watch.
Michael Oher is now saying the Touhy family never adopted him as everyone thought. He claims in his lawsuit that the Touhys tricked him into becoming his conservators, meaning they have control over his money. What is your reaction to what he's alleging?
I wasn't expecting that. I think a lot of people, myself included again, had such high hopes for the family and that union that we felt they had put together.
Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for playing Leanne Touhy. But now some people on social media are actually calling for Bullock to return her Oscar. Can you tell me what you think about this call by some for Sandra Bullock to return her Oscar?
She was an actress who did her part and was recognized for it.
Michael Oher, who went on to become an NFL star, also says he resented how the movie made him appear less intelligent.
I didn't know who Michael was before The Blind Side. It wasn't my intention to make him look that way, and I'm sorry that he took it that way.
Lawyers for the family say they are stunned by Oher's actions, which they say are designed to drum up publicity for his new book.
The Touhys treated him like a son. They loved him. They don't need his money. They've never needed his money. Mr. Touhy sold his company for $220 million.
The Blind Side movie grossed $309 million.
Got him at the end there, right? Notice the snark at the end. The movie grossed over $300 million, the anchor notes, implying that the Touhys somehow received all that money or even a significant amount of it. Like if someone writes a book about you and that's turned into a movie, if you're the subject of the movie, you get 100% of the profits because that's the way it works. No, in reality, they received less than 3% of the proceeds, which is nothing compared to the $200 million they sold their company for. So this is the level of reporting we're seeing on this, with one exception. Over at The Blaze, Jason Whitlock decided not to simply rewrite Oher's complaint to push a narrative. He's written some fantastic articles on this topic you should read, and he motivated me to personally go and read some of the many pieces of documented evidence contradicting Michael Oher's claims. These are pieces of evidence that every major media outlet is ignoring. For example, here's what Oher himself wrote in his own memoir in 2012. Quote, since I was already over the age of 18 and considered an adult by the state of Tennessee, Sean and Leanne would be named as my legal conservators. They explained to me that it means pretty much the exact same thing as adoptive parents, but that the laws were just written in a way that took my age into account. Honestly, I didn't care what it was called. My mother was going to be at the hearing to agree that she supported the decision to have the Touhys listed as my next of kin and legal conservators. So that was more than a decade ago. Michael Oher, an adult in his mid-20s at the time, when the memoir was published, clearly acknowledges the distinction between being adopted and being a legal conservator. clearly acknowledges that he was not adopted. He uses the term conservators several times in the book. But we're told to believe that more than 10 years later, he finally decided to look into it and realized he had been tricked. We're supposed to believe that he just realized some truth that he himself had already publicly acknowledged in a book he published over 10 years ago. So how was Michael Oher supposedly not aware of this? Did he not read his own memoir? Did he not watch the movie The Blind Side? There's a scene in the film where Leanne establishes legal guardianship over Michael Oher. There is no scene where she says that she's legally adopting him. That claim was never made by anyone, ever. Now, to be clear, I can't say for sure who's right or wrong in this case, though I have my very strong suspicions. I wouldn't be surprised if all parties concerned are at least partially in the wrong to some extent. That's usually how these kinds of conflicts go. And if the media wants to tell us that the Touhys aren't really saviors, I'd certainly agree with that. There's only one savior. His name isn't Touhy. But then again, the Touhys, to my knowledge, have never claimed to be saviors. They also never claimed to be saints or martyrs. They did a nice thing for a kid who needed help. That's a fact, and that's all. Does this conflict stem from the fact that although the Touhys became Oher's guardians and treated him like a son, they didn't intend to actually pass their fortune down to him because they wanted to go to their actual kids? Is Michael Oher upset that he's not now, today, as a 37-year-old man, reaping the financial benefits of being a blood relation to the Touhys? I mean, these are purely speculations, but I think reasonable ones. But I don't know. The key point is that the media's complete lack of curiosity on all of these obvious red flags tells you everything you need to know about the left's perspective on race. A decade ago, only a handful of insufferable outlets complained about The Blind Side, and now all of academia and the major media outlets are doing it. You know, they're united to smear a family that helped save a young black teenager's life without any regard for facts or contrary evidence. They're just running in and running with the narrative. After 8 years of Barack Obama and all those BLM riots and George Floyd funerals, we've arrived basically at this moral guidance. Let the black teenager on the side of the road freeze to death. Don't help him, or you're a racist. Well, at least we now have some clarity from the party of Black Lives Matter and from the corporate media. Somehow a sports movie from 2009 has led them all to admit what they really think, which is better to leave the black kid languishing in the gutter than reach out and help him. Better to look the other way than be a white savior. That's the message coming in loud and clear. And I suspect that a lot of white people who have watched this Michael Oher saga play out, and who have seen everything that's happened over the past decade or so, are going to take that message to heart and respond accordingly. The next Michael Oher, the next disadvantaged black kid who needs a helping hand, might not get it. He might end up suffering the fate that Oher likely would have suffered had the Touhys not stepped in. That's apparently what the left wants. And now, tragically, that's what they'll get. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.